Good afternoon, everyone. This weekend is a very special weekend for me and my family. It's been 18 years since we've been in the US. And so 18 years ago, to this day, was also the first time that I saw snow. So April 8th, 2000 also snowed. So similar weeks to what we're dealing with, right? My name is Lucas. I'm undocumented, unafraid, and here to stay. I reflect a lot in my time here in the US as a young person growing up undocumented and in the work that I do now. And I reflect a lot about, I wasn't always outspoken about my status. I was afraid at one point, and now I can stand here and say I'm undocumented and unafraid. And what was that process for me as a young person coming to this empowered self, where I can use an identity that continues to marginalize me and it continues to oppress me, but I can use it in a way that empowers me. And so I think a lot about that in my role now as a director of an organization where I have to leverage my privilege as an adult in providing young people access to speak truth to power and speak about the changes and reimagine the world that they want to see. So to give you a little bit more about myself, I was born in Brazil. I come from a very poor childhood, and my family, my parents never graduated high school, and so for us, education was so important. And I remember my parents talking to us about immigrating to the US and what it would mean for our family. And for me, it was an opportunity to study whatever I wanted to study, work in whatever I wanted to study, to start a better life for our family. A lot of the similar stories that you hear from immigrants that come to this country. And so in 2000, we packed up our lives and came to America. I remember growing up and understanding that I was undocumented, but I didn't necessarily knew what that meant for me and how it would impact my life until I went to high school. And when I got into high school and I wanted to get my driver's license, and my parents sat me down and were like, no, you can't. Or when I started thinking about college and get really excited about college, and my parents said, we don't know how to help you. You're not gonna be able to. And at the same time, my best friend, one of my best friends at the time, his family was deported. And so when all these things started happening, and I think we can all relate to being a young person in high school, and you have that rebel stage where you're just questioning everything, like why is this happening? Why is this happening? And I think about the support system that I had. Not very many people knew about my status. I had my guidance counselor that I shared all this frustration with her, and she was able to guide me into finding out some of these answers. How can I go to college as an undocumented young person? And when I applied to college, and it was, I got into schools, but financial aid was a huge factor. I became really depressed. And it was my guidance counselor and some of the adult allies in my life that really pushed me to figure out other strategies. And that's when I went to community college. And when I got to community college, community college is so diverse. There's people from all different walks of life, from all different experiences. I think that's when the seeds of social justice were planted. And I started really asking a lot of questions about why these things are happening to me. And it was through that process of being politicized by understanding sort of the world around me that I was able to expand for myself and not just ask questions about why things were happening to me, but why things were happening to young people around me, young people of color, communities around me. And it was that time where a couple of undocumented college students here in Connecticut wanted to form an extension of the DREAM Act movement. And I was invited to this meeting in New Haven where it was a group of students, and we sat in a circle, and we were all young, and we were all undocumented. And at that time, we started sharing stories with each other. And all of our stories had similar themes of isolation, of fear, right? But it was that circle where we recognize the power that we have in our stories, in sharing our stories, in bringing a human face to an issue that now is so politicized, and it's all about statistics, right? And so we recognize the power in our stories. And that circle, that community that I've built around me with young people was so magical. I felt like a sense of power for the first time, being undocumented in this country, but collectively creating this community where we were able to act together and fight for our rights together. And I remember when we started having events and sharing our stories, the pushback that we received from adults. Adults were saying, you're putting yourself in danger, but you're also putting your family in danger of deportation. Adults saying, this is not the right way to do it. You need to respect, you need to respect how the systems go. This is how you create a law, not by speaking out when you can't even vote. These are real conversations that were told to us by adults. And I remember us having events where we would share our stories, and before we would share our stories, we would look at YouTube videos of SNCC students in the civil rights movement doing sit-ins, and all of these, the walkouts that happened in the 60s, all of these inspirational figures that were young people and were leading social change. And for us, sharing my story was me defying what it's expected of an undocumented person to do. And so for me, it was my civil rights movement. And so I reflect a lot about those times. And I think we can't deny the role that young people have in social movements. All across us, all of the issues that impact our daily lives, most issues, if not all, also impact young people at a much higher rate, in a much more disproportionate way. And so as we think about what it means to be a young person, reimagining the future and the world that they want to be in, what role do we have as an adult in becoming an ally to a young person? And what are the challenges these young people go through that a lot of the times as adults, we push them even farther? You know, I love the metaphor about drawing. And in the society that we live in, there are lines that are drawn all around us. Adults draw lines all around us. And young people, especially young people that are impacted by these issues, that young people of color, they are coloring within and outside of these lines with vibrant colors. But sometimes as adults, that when they step outside of our comfort zones, we say, stop, you've gone too much. Or sometimes as adults, we tokenize young people for their ability to speak up, their academic achievements, and the ability to articulate all of these issues that are impacting them with very almost elitist sort of vocabulary, right? When there are young people that literally don't have the words to describe what they're going through, and they may express themselves in many different ways, and they're heavily impacted by these issues, but we don't give them a space to talk, and we don't give them a space, and we don't amplify their voices. So as adults, what do we think about in letting young people speak for themselves? When I think about heroes, I think about young people, especially young people of color, that are literally fighting for their lives. They're fighting to just live. And they're fighting to not just change the circumstances for themselves, but for their communities. And in a lot of circumstances, there are systems that are outside of them that does not allow young people to become heroes. And a lot of the times, it's adults that perpetuate this adultism. And when I say adultism, I mean sort of the power that adults have over young people that may come through very microaggressions, very simple ways that we allow some voices to be heard, but some voices, especially those that are most marginalized, to not be seen or heard. And so, as adults, especially in my role now, where I'm trying to give access to young people, I think about a lot of the lessons that I've learned being a young person and going through all those experiences where I felt like shut off by adults, to this point in which I'm trying to get more access to adults, or to kids. And one of the things that I think about is how do we include young people in real, authentic decision making? Young people should have the power to say, to decide on the things that impacts their lives. And a lot of the times as adults, whether it is in the business sector or in the nonprofit or at school, we don't acknowledge the power dynamic in which we influence young people to go a certain way without actually listening to them and asking them, what do you think about this? So how do we create authentic opportunities for young people to be part of decision making in society? The second one of all is how do we as adults coach young people? I think young people are best positioned to share the strategies that they would like to undergo to create social change. And as adults, it might be uncomfortable. I think about my time when I started fighting for the DREAM Act in 2010, and here we are fighting for the DREAM Act 8 years later, and a lot of the young people that are engaged in our organization are saying, we want to do this, we want to do this. And I have to stop and think to myself, okay, why am I getting defensive? Why am I feeling uncomfortable about these tactics that they want to engage in when I was at one point that way? And we're living in a total different world. And so giving the opportunity to ask young people, what do you want, if you want to engage in this strategy, here are some skills that I can teach you. Here are some ways that I can coach you, not telling you what to do, but coaching you through the decision in which you made. And so I think about all these ways in which now me in my role as an adult have an influence to open up access. And one of the most important things that I want to leave with you all is that a lot of the times as adults, we don't recognize our internal biases. And we don't recognize that these internal biases are a byproduct of greater structural and institutional systems that are impacting all of us, but young people especially. It's not a coincidence that, let's say, the students in Florida right now that are speaking out and getting all the media attention are from upper class, privileged, mostly white students, while students in Baltimore or Chicago are going through gun violence on their daily lives, but their voices are not being heard. We have to recognize how in our role as adults, in combating how we perpetuate adultism, we try to do our best under these systems that continue to oppress all of us, especially young people. And so I think that this is an ongoing process. How do we stop and actively listen to young people? And I think when you're listening and when you're seeing young people speak out, speak truth to power, making people feel uncomfortable. If you're feeling uncomfortable, I think it's important for you to think about for yourself, why am I feeling defensive? Why, is there a story or a specific voice in which I'm not listening? Who's most marginalized in these issues that they're talking about? And what is my role and how can I teach them and coach them on different skills or in how to get their social change agenda accomplished? When I think about heroes, I think about young people that are engaged in my organization, like Najeli, Angie, Eric, who face so many obstacles in their day-to-day lives, but they still show up. And we lose legislation, we lose campaigns, but they're still fighting. And in the society that we live in, where all these lines are drawn around us, where legislators are trying to kick me out or deport me and my friends, we have to reimagine the future. And we have to allow ourselves to get out of that comfort zone and color in with as many colors as possible. And so when I think about the power of young people, and when I think about young people in power and giving them the opportunity to speak their truth, I see them as heroes. And I think for all of us, and when we're listening to stories and when we're listening to young people, it's not just about listening to them and the words that they are saying, but also supporting them and listening to their actions that they're doing. Whatever the tactic may be and whatever the tactic is, it might make you feel uncomfortable. But heroes teach us lessons. And the heroes that I see are young people of color that are fighting for their lives, that are trying to survive, given all the circumstances that are around them. And so next time you see a young person, I want you to stop and really listen to them. And don't listen for leadership qualities and the ability for them to express themselves. Really try to understand where they're coming from and be honest about not understanding where they're coming from. Sometimes it's important for us to acknowledge the power dynamics that we have as adults in this society that we live in the limitations even, in allowing young people to thrive. And so heroes teach us lessons. And so you would be surprised if you just become aware about the lessons that young people are teaching you every single day. Thank you.